Hello and welcome back to the Auditorium Conference. I hope you're all really enjoying Virtual Expo so far. So this session is going to focus on in-flight connectivity, and it's a session that you can play an active role in yourselves by submitting questions using the Q&A feature. We'll be keeping a very close eye on those questions as they come in throughout the next hour, so please do get involved. I'm delighted to say that moderating this session for us, we have Maryann Simson, Director at APEX Media. So Marianne will be a familiar face to those of you who have attended an FTE or APEX event in the past, and we're very pleased to have her with us live today to lead this session for the next 60 minutes. So over to you, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for the lovely introduction. Hi, everybody who is watching. It's unfortunate that I can't see you all this year, couldn't see you all this year at the APEX and FTE events, but nevertheless, here we are today. So let's get started. Thanks everybody for joining this session, which is of course all about looking at the business case for in-flight connectivity advancement post-COVID-19. If you read the agenda, you'll see that this is meant to be a frank and open discussion, which I think is the only way to do it, really. So joining us to share their frank and open insights today are representatives from 2 US airlines and 1 global in-flight connectivity provider, which is Intelsat. So we're very lucky to have with us today Frederik van Essen from Intelsat. Hi, Frederik.
Hi, Marianne. Great being here.
Great to have you. Next, we've got Derrick Cunningham, who is IFEC Program Manager from Alaska Airlines. Thank you for being here, Derrick.
Hi.
Hi. And we've got Tara Bamburg, who's Manager of Inflight WiFi and Entertainment at Southwest Airlines. Hi, Tara. Tara.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
We practiced that. Okay. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so we're going to start things off by giving each panelist the floor for about 5 minutes so that they can share an update on how the pandemic has affected their business and operations, how they may have shifted focus or priorities in 2020, and what strategies they believe are going to be central to recovery. So we'll go ladies first. Tara, can you give us a little bit of an update?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Marianne said, Tara Bamburg, I oversee the customer side of our strategy initiatives for in-flight Wi-Fi and entertainment here at Southwest. So I'm sure like any other airlines that are on here and really anyone in this industry, COVID-19 has really been a huge hit to the overall experience. But for those of you not familiar with Southwest, we operate an all Boeing fleet of aircraft, primarily in the CONUS part of the United States. We also do have service to and from Hawaii, going into Central and South America. Going into this pandemic, our entire fleet is equipped with in-flight Wi-Fi, courtesy of Global Eagle Entertainment. And in that portfolio, we not only have connectivity, which is free for our A-List preferred passengers, which are our top tier customers. It's an $8 all-day day pass for customers who do not fall into that tier. So it gives them that ability when they're on connecting flights to have that purchase follow them. We have free live TV, free movies, free stored TV, free messaging, free music. So really trying to, we do a lot of that to balance, to allow customers to take part in free entertainment so that we can preserve the connectivity experience for those customers that really need it to stay on top of work while they're traveling. With the pandemic, we have seen a huge shift, not only in the number of customers that we have on board, but just the type of customer. So before, as we have seen our Southwest Business Group really grow the business travel within our customer base, that has effectively come to a halt, like so many other airlines during this time. So the need for connectivity has definitely shifted. For the customers who are purchasing it before, we're maybe more focused on those traditional business elements of checking email, being able to VPN in, accessing their files. That has now completely shifted. We do still see a lot of that, but as we all know, the way that we're all doing business now is very different. Before, customers just expecting to be able to do their email while in flight. they're trying to access shared files that are being uploaded real time with their colleagues back on the ground. So the few customers that are still traveling for business, they definitely have a totally different mentality than those that would have been traveling at the start of the year.
Okay, are you done? That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Tara, let's go next to Derrick. Derrick, can you give us the lowdown on what's been going on with Alaska Airlines?
Yeah, so similar to, I think we have a similar footprint maybe to Southwest, but we're at this cross section kind of at the beginning of the pandemic where we were really in the final stretch of finishing our retrofit program, where we were really going all in with Gogo's 2KU, or now Intelsat. And so that project really had to pause. And so our focus has really been around providing that at-home-like experience for our guests whenever they're flying. We want to make sure that if they want to be able to stream their Netflix while they're flying, that's an experience that they're able to have. And so really that project was put on hold, but it's something that we're picking back up, and we're really doubling down on kind of that ease of use conversation and how do we really make it as easy to use in-flight entertainment and Wi-Fi as possible. A little bit more on our product. You know, we use Gogo for both mainline and our regional fleets. And we also have a fully streaming in-flight entertainment service, so no seatback screens. And what we've actually seen because of that is that guests are continued to be comfortable using our in-flight entertainment and Wi-Fi products, and we've seen really strong engagement. And I think similar to Tara, we've also seen a change in the type of guest that's flying us. And so I think that's presented its own challenges in making sure that people who are maybe not as familiar with us, or maybe don't want to touch that literature that's in the seat back that explains how to use our system, making sure that we're able to bring them along and really enjoy kind of the full benefits of the product that we've put on board. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that we've seen, and something that we've been working to kind of overcome with touchless technology, or even something as simple as a QR code. I think the benefit of the pandemic is that it's been a forcing function for us to continue to innovate. We've done a lot of work behind the scenes to be able to enable kind of a better experience for our guests using the connectivity that's on board. So kind of two things that I think really have stood out to me is contactless payment. So we've, like most airlines, we've taken food for purchase off of board, but it's something that we're slowly been able to step back into because we've included a stored payment method, which has been able to allow our guests to order our signature fruit and cheese platter, which was a huge win for the guest experience, but would not have been possible without connectivity. And then the other thing that we were able to do is a little bit more on the back end, and we enabled a crew messaging feature, which was something that we had always wanted to do, but it really allowed our in-flight crew to reduce the time that they were spending in the aisles. And so someone all the way in the first class galley was able to chat with someone in the back of the aircraft very efficiently, and make sure that they're getting service done, but also in a way that's being thoughtful about the safety of our guests and time in the aisle. So that's, I think that's actually kind of opened up as we start to look to the future, how do we kind of continue to build on those platforms and make sure that we're making the most use of the connectivity on board.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Derrick. Frederik, your turn.
Yeah, I'm Frederik van Essen, Inmarsat's Vice President of Aero, and probably Intelsat is by far the most or least known name on this panel and with the viewers. We're actually the largest satellite operator in the world with 54 satellites around the world. And we're supplying capacity to 75% of all the connected aircraft in the world. Yet our brand has always been serving the market indirectly, so nobody knows the name Intelsat, probably until last week when we announced that we had acquired Gogo, which is probably the largest IFC provider to airlines in the world. So this for us is really a move forward into the mobility space, but especially the in-flight connectivity space. I think if you look at Intelsat, it's a very diverse company. We're serving not just mobility, but also government and media. Over 2 billion people worldwide are watching television via our satellites. And thanks to that diversity, we've been lucky enough to have pretty solid revenues throughout the COVID crisis. So in that sense, it has actually provided us with an opportunity to position ourselves for a post-COVID world. And one of the things that we see, and what I'm hearing back also a little bit in the stories here from Derrick and Tara, is that connectivity provides all kinds of new opportunities in this crisis. And innovating is something that's in our DNA, but it's also something that now a lot of airlines are actually doing behind the scenes in this crisis. And I think making moves like the acquisition of Gogo is actually similar to what airlines are doing around the world when they are in a position to position themselves for this post-COVID world. Behind the scenes, they are doing a lot of innovation and making a lot of changes. And so even though times are not great now, I think there's a lot of people looking forward in the industry actually to travel returning and then making a change to how they operate.
Awesome. Thank you, all three of you. The topic of this session is IFC advancement post-COVID. So I would wonder from all of you what you think post-COVID means for aviation. And is that an entire return to normal? Is that a staged comeback? What does post-COVID mean for each of you? And maybe we'll just go in the same order and start again with Tara.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to say that post-COVID means a sharp V-shaped, uprisal back into the passenger counts that we had at the start of the year. I don't think that's probably realistic. And so I think that I know that there's a change in the focus for connectivity, at least for Southwest for sure. So we have always, when we first started installing connectivity on aircraft, the primary focus was the customer experience piece of it. And so how do we keep the customer connected to what matters most when they're traveling with us? I think one of the shifts that we've seen over the past couple of months is, and it's been a really great shift, is it continues to highlight that, and I've mentioned this before at some panel within the past couple of years, the operational needs are so great in this space. And I think that having less customers on board, and so some of the things that Derrick mentioned, definitely help on the guest experience side, but I think also really enable the flight attendants and the pilots to be better connected. And so there's been a new shift of looking at items that maybe we hadn't been able to prioritize before because the return on investment wasn't the same. It's so hard when in companies like Southwest and probably Alaska as well, to have that bottom line return to really justify a lot of the things that you're doing. And with the focus on contactless and touchless and trying to streamline those experiences between the customers and the flight attendants, we'll use, for us, we don't have food for purchase on board, but we do have alcohol. And we currently are not serving alcohol on board because we're not, despite the bar cart you can all probably see that sits right next to where I sit, but we're not serving alcohol on board because we're not taking any payment for it. And one of the things that we've noticed between like our flight attendants and our customers, even trying to order complimentary beverages, the masks make it really hard for our flight attendants to understand because they're so good at being able to read customers' lips because they're in a noisy cabin. You put a mask over them and it's such a light bulb type moment it makes total sense. So how do we figure out ways to take that learning and implement it into something that's already on board? So there's definitely been a focus, and I'm excited for it to continue, rather than our portfolio primarily being made up of customer experience initiatives, to also have some operational efficiencies brought into there, to spend more time focusing on the operations and what their opportunities are, what areas we can kind of help them, any issues that they're experiencing. So I think it's been an opportunity to really spotlight the operational side that I am hopeful will continue, that we'll continue to have that support internally as well, that it may not always be the same ROI across the board, but it's something that we need to build a strong foundation for our folks so that they can better assist customers when they're in the air.
That's brilliant. You know, I never thought about the, I guess the communication breakdown that can occur because of the mask, or because of the fact that you don't want to get too close to people, and the enablement that IFC can bring on in that regard. Derrick, do you have some thoughts on what post-COVID means from the connectivity, through the connectivity lens, I guess, for Alaska Airlines?
Yeah, so I mean, I think as I kind of alluded to, it's really been the impetus for us to start to invest in kind of these crew and guest technologies. And I think more than anything, it's proven out the concepts that we've always wanted to work on. And I think similar to Tara, we've always ended up in a backlog somewhere. And so I think you'll continue to see us invest in kind of this digital platform for guests and crew in order to help our operation. I think something that, if you look at us compared to perhaps the rest of the hospitality industry, whether that's going to a restaurant or going to a hotel, technology is not always necessarily core to your flight experience until like after you've checked in and gotten your boarding pass on your phone. And so are there ways that we can kind of make your phone more central to your travel experience when you're on board? So we do that today with in-flight entertainment. We do that today with Wi-Fi, but it still feels a little disjointed from the rest of the guest experience, I would say. And, you know, without saying too much, there's probably more ways that we can make the travel journey easier while you're on board. And then I think from the operational standpoint, we've seen like tremendous success in this flight attendant messaging app. We've also extended it to our flight attendants, like during boarding are able to talk to our customer service agents and talk about things like, hey, the bins are full, you need to start tagging bags. And so I think continuing to build that platform where we can bring more people on, including pilots, or even if our operations team on the ground is able to kind of give the crew an update for inclement weather or anything that might be causing a delay whenever they land. I think all of those things enable our crews to get the information that they need really quickly and provide outstanding service to our guests. And I think that's kind of where our mentality is headed post-pandemic, is how do we continue to make those investments?
Awesome. Okay, let's take it back to right now with Frederik. Frederik, Intelsat has been conducting a survey of the industry, and you're trying to really understand the sentiment, the feelings of the industry professionals around connectivity and what role it's going to play in our recovery. Can you share some detail on the specific results or the overall sentiment that's coming through?
Yeah, of course, Marianne. We recently ran a small survey amongst stakeholders in the aviation industry, and what we were trying to find out and engage a bit was how the pandemic is affecting the trends in passenger demand and airline IFC requirements. I think overall what we're seeing is, I would say, some guarded optimism, but definite optimism. We asked people, amongst others, about the investment climate, and we were expecting actually to see many airlines respond saying, oh, all investments are off, and for the coming years we won't be investing anything, we're in financial trouble. But actually most respondents came back and said, well, yes, we have deferred investments due to COVID, but projects certainly aren't off the table, and we're just deferring them and trying to bring them back as soon as possible instead of really putting it off. So I'd say that underlines that guarded optimism we're seeing in the industry. Everybody is trying to very much look forward to traffic coming back and being ready for that.
Okay, well, we'll watch out for more results from that survey. I know I personally am looking forward to. Well,
Marianne, there's a whole bunch of interesting things I can mention. if you want me, I'm happy to give you a few highlights. Maybe that's interesting for the viewers as well as for Derrick and Derrick to maybe respond to.
Yeah, I think very quickly, if you've got any actual percentages or stats or something we can really bite into from that would be great.
Yeah, well, actually, the survey very much confirmed what actually Tara and Derrick were just saying, that we're seeing that 71% of respondents anticipate that the passenger demand for especially remote work-based applications, such as video conferencing, cloud computing, VPN, will increase. And interestingly enough, when I talked to my new colleagues at GoGo, they mentioned that they have actually seen in the last few months, even though the passenger levels are still very much down, an increase in the uptake and usage by passengers that are on board. So somehow people still want to work when they travel. It gives them a sense of security being in contact. We see that still a large 62% of people believe that the quality of IFC is really a differentiating factor for their airline. And interestingly enough, if you change it around, 53% of the people working for airlines actually think that reliable Wi-Fi has the greatest impact on their brand's Net Promoter Score. So from both sides, I think the importance of IFC is seen to have gone up. And largest impediments are still the pricing for Wi-Fi, often seen as too high, a poor experience in too many cases, and notably also the hassle of getting connected, having to get your credit card out, going through these payments portals and things. The 72%, again, a large majority of respondents think that the capital and OPEX cost of IFC are a top concern for airlines. So interesting to hear from Tara and Derrick about that. And many of them think that sponsorships and other means should be used to offset the cost of providing it. And we also asked, clearly, following that acquisition we just did of GoGo, how people feel about vertical integration in the industry. And 53% think it's actually quite positive, where mainly they think it will help simplify IFC services and decrease the selection risk that airlines now face. Well, that's a great positive to hear.
That is very positive to hear, Frederik. And it's so funny because we just had a question from one of the viewers. This is a question from Devin. And he asked, will we see more vertical integration by satellite operators with service providers such as Intelsat and GoGo? And I'm not sure who on the panel wants to put their hand up and answer that one. I think Frederik would be natural, but it would be cool to hear from one of the airlines on this question as well.
No takers, then.
Frederik, then. Yeah.
Then it's down to me.
It's hard to read the a little bit when you can't see each other who's going to jump in. But
okay, okay. Tara first. We'll do Tara first and Frederik second then.
I mean, I think we've talked a lot for a long time about there's, I'll never forget, I think it was Chris from NSR on one of their presentations at a conference said that the industry was ripe for merger and acquisition. And so I think it's something we really see the landscape of just all the service providers in this space from different levels, you know, from the ones that are integrating directly with airlines to some of the back-end service providers like Intelsat, who's now coming into it. I think there's such an interesting mix. Obviously, having those layers does add in cost, I think is a fair assumption from an airline perspective. So I think for how we kind of see it is it's less about the who, it's just trying to figure out how do we find those cost-effective opportunities so we can deliver the best possible experience to the customer. So I think there's just a lot of players in this space when you really kind of look at it all in one view. So I think it would not be surprising as an airline to continue to see those types of relationships start to form and companies finding their best attributes and joining with others to really build out a really robust solution.
Great, thank you. Derrick, would you have anything to add to that? Agree or disagree?
I mean, I think maybe heavy emphasis on the cost piece. I think that feels like the most tangible benefit. I'm sure there are many others, but I think that's one of, as the industry kind of moves to a free or freemium or insert kind of model here, I think that's going to be something that's top of mind as we try to figure out what our own take is on that.
Okay, so looking at cost, which is perfect because that is the whole point of this session, the business case. Frederik, how do you think that vertical integration helps make a better business case for continuing to invest or to convince airlines to invest in their in-flight connectivity?
Yeah, I think vertical integration certainly helps with the economics. I mean, having too many layers and different parties certainly doesn't help in that respect. There's also another angle, I'd say, and that is if you're designing the satellite networks, you actually take quite a long view. So you need to understand really, really well what it is that your customers want. And then you can design things according to those wishes. And you need to anticipate. Satellites take a long time to design, launch, and then have a long economic life. So being close to customers is actually a great advantage. Plus that integration helps with, let's say, the financial stability of those parties. And I think that's much more in line with how airlines think. Airlines need to also plan ahead for a long time. I mean, if you buy a new fleet, it's going to be around for the next 15, maybe sometimes even 20 or more years. So you want to know that you're working with a party that can support you long term. And if you have a lot of fragmentation in the industry, the risk that you face when choosing a partner in IFC is much larger. And I think that is a hindrance to making choices. It also blocks innovation. And I think this vertical integration will help. And to Tara's point, I wouldn't be surprised if this is not going to be the first move we'll see in the industry. And you never know what's going to happen, but typically when these things have been anticipated for a long time, there needs to be a trigger, and COVID might have been that trigger to then set off some further moves. So it's quite exciting going forward what we'll see happening.
Okay, so we're taking bets on what the next merger and acquisition announcement is going to be to create a more vertically integrated model. We talked a lot about crew functionality and how connectivity is enabling the crew to communicate with each other or communicate with passengers more from a distance. Two questions. So one is my own and one is from Seth Miller, aviation journalist who many of us know very well, who's watching, and he wants to know if there are any specific areas other than payments, which are more passenger facing, that they're working on in terms of crew operations. So for the airlines, how else is connectivity enabling the crew to be more efficient, effective, sell better, aside from the actual payment side? And then I think my second question on that is that, was it not possible for the crew to message each other and for passengers to message crew without connectivity going off the plane? I understand there's a lot of onboard systems, closed Wi-Fi, not Wi-Fi, rather near-Fi solutions that enable the same sort of messaging. So what would be the difference here?
keep it short because I think we do not have the crew messaging capabilities. So I think that Derrick will have a more robust answer there. But for the other ways that we're looking to enable, one of the things that we were able to push even during this time was one of those projects that had been on the backboard or on the backlog of having our customers be able to view sample travel forms. So when they're traveling to and from destinations that require immigration or customs information, those years ago were in the back of our onboard magazine. As we've continued to expand our network footprint, we removed those. And so there puts a lot of onus onto the flight attendant to try to assist those customers real time. So we've been able to push during this time the ability for customers to view those samples themselves and self-serve a little bit, more so than they would have done before. It's funny, it's something that actually came as a request from our flight attendants years ago. And we were excited to finally get it out just because we were able to prioritize that as a need. So that's been one of the primary things, is just focusing across from the Southwest perspective, just looking at self-service as a whole. So determining in the in-flight journey, how can we do that, not only with their interaction with flight attendants, but also communicating with, if there's irregular ops, how do we enable the ability for customers to do live chat with our customer relations reps on the ground so that they're not stressing out about if they're having to change flights. So bringing some of that power back to the customer so they don't feel that anxiety of not knowing what's going to be, on them on the other side. But since we don't have communication, I'll definitely defer to Derrick on that piece of it. So,
thank you.
Yeah. To start with your first question, other apps. We've been kind of building out a catalog of apps that our crew has access to. So on the pilot side of things, they have access to very specific weather information that allows them to do things like avoid rough air or reroute if there's inclement weather. And so that has kind of its whole host of benefits, from a better flight experience to also saving fuel. For our flight attendants, we're piloting a med-air app integration. So the ability to get medical help while they're in the air, which obviously is kind of a challenging space to get medical help. And so we're continuing to find ways to, what are some of those kind of safety critical even things that connectivity can help power. I think on the kind of the messaging side of things, I know you mentioned kind of like NFC or other types of technology that may have been possible, but the app that's actually a part of is kind of like the hub for flight attendants. And so we call it block to block. It allows them to do things like recognize loyalty status, confirm the passenger manifest, now chat. And so we really want to make sure that everything is integrated as one service for flight attendants, so that way they're not opening up 10, 15 apps to do their job. We want to make it as easy as possible for them. And this was really the way for us to not necessarily have them thumbing through 5, 10 apps.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, COVID seems to have been both a catalyst and a hindrance for the implementation of technology. I think across the entire passenger journey, we hear this from airports, we're hearing this from all over the place. Can the group speak to both sides of this statement? So how has the pandemic stopped you from maybe moving forward with things, and how has it instigated you to do more?
I think the obvious with it being a hindrance is the financial implications of it. I know from a Southwest perspective, Wi-Fi is not a required to fly element, and it's something that is secondary to things like safety and the pure focus of what we're trying to do. So as you look at a lot of the roadmaps that we probably had at the end of 2019 and going into 2020, the bright-eyed ambitions and things like that we're looking at of trying to continue to further the customer experience, especially on the connectivity side, it's no understatement to say that those came to a screeching halt in a lot of ways, mostly because this, as everyone on this panel knows, and from a participant list as well, it's not cheap to do business where we are. And so in this actual element, in this space of the industry. And so when it comes time to figure out where to cut costs, something that's not required to fly and is expensive becomes a big focus area. So a lot of the efforts that we were doing of looking to continue to improve that customer experience for both the internal and external customers, because the operations also, when we improve the experience, they have a benefit from that as well on their side. Those really came to a halt. And so I think that's the obvious kind of hindrance piece of it. And it's because the lead times are so long as well, it becomes, you've made decisions for the near term to kind of stop some of that spending, but the ramp up to get it back going is not in this very near future either. And so I think that's definitely the hindrance piece of it. The good piece of it, and kind of what I alluded to earlier, is it's allowed us to focus on some of the foundational things that maybe sat on a backlog for a long time, that you get approved for budget, and we're very much a use it or lose it. Sorry for the dog walking in the background, but trying to use that budget. And so a lot of times you're spending that on those customer experience outward benefits and not focusing on the foundation and really building the house from the ground up. So I think that's been the really good piece of it, is it's allowed us to figure out where there were holes and start plugging those more efficiently.
All right, and Derrick, you mentioned about your install with the 2KU sort of slowing right down. I imagine that's been a hindrance. Can you add to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, we had to completely, in the spirit of cash flow, having to kind of pause that project. I do think with kind of pausing, we were kind of full steam ahead on that. And I think in the spirit of pausing that, or pausing some of the portal enhancement projects that we had, because the ease of use of portal is also top of mind, neck and neck with installs. It also gave us time to kind of resharpen our focus and really understand what are we actually trying to achieve through all of these projects. So I think it's reaffirmed within our company how important, with our top leadership, how important in-flight and connectivity is. And I think that's the one silver lining out of all of this, is that we're full steam ahead again on trying to figure out how to pick up this retrofit project. We're full steam ahead again on how to make the portal easier to use, and similar to what Tara was saying, removing things from the backlog that we know will have a meaningful impact. But I'm not sure we would have had that sharp of a focus without having that chance to pause.
Thank you. Frederik, can you speak to this one as well?
Yeah, no, it's great to hear that IFC has really gained in focus at top management. I think another angle contributing from my own airline experience is that during the COVID crisis, I think a lot of airlines have realized the importance of being very responsive in real time. And so the ability to gather data from aircraft, from passengers, etc., from your operation, and collecting that and taking decisions in real time, because things were changing so quickly. You had to shut down flights, airports, restart certain flights, cancel them again, move passengers around, etc. That's a hugely complex task, and so it has pushed, I think, digital really to the foreground. And a lot of airlines where they're realizing, hey, if we want to be successful post-COVID, we actually need to make haste with this. And maybe the silver lining in the crisis is then also that it helps you to break through silos and barriers that were there before, where people said, okay, it's working just fine, and now you can actually try new things, and hey, it works maybe even better. Let's keep that. And so in that sense, it's making a step forward as well. But clearly, it's unfortunate that a crisis like this would be necessary for that.
That part goes without saying, I think. It sure is unfortunate. Okay, we're talking about, again, business case, how do we make this make dollars and cents and not just cents? What are some of the commercial opportunities that can be enabled by IFC? And when I say commercial, I'm really thinking about retail here. What can we sell people? How can we upgrade things? What partners can we bring in who want to be part of our environment and pay us to have the pleasure of doing that, that can be enabled by IFC? And in particular, taking into consideration the shift in consumer behavior that we're seeing now. We've got a different type of passenger on board. So what are the opportunities now for upselling, selling, partnering that with the current, I guess, passenger mix, or the one that we can see in the next 12 to 18 months that IFC is going to enable? What's the low-hanging fruit, I guess?
I mean, I think it's for us, we don't, the obvious stuff is obviously the onboard purchase for drinks and snacks. We are looking at how do we bring back alcohol for customers on board so that we can start collecting from that revenue. Again, obviously doing so in a way that makes sense for customers as well as though for the safety of our crew. But I think we historically have always really looked at partnership opportunities. We first started that when we launched live TV in 2013. It was with sponsorship with Dish. And so having them offset those costs, and to some of the points that Derrick made too about the importance of the portal, there's so much, when you have a captive audience, there's so much opportunity there of being able to offset a lot of your costs by featuring those different partners, giving them the opportunity. We also have a huge relationship with Chase. And so continuing to drive that onboard application process. So even if it's not that direct revenue right away, obviously people are using their credit cards probably more than they ever have before. So the consumer behavior is very different. And so the more folks that we can get into that flow is important. I think from a long-term in-flight connectivity standpoint, because there's so many different needs for connectivity that didn't exist before. So the ways that people can stay connected and collaborate real time in a way that doesn't disrupt the rest of the cabin is important too. And so we've always been very simple and straightforward of it's an $8 price point all day. It's the same service across the board. We don't have different tiered offerings currently. But I think because the traffic has shifted a little bit, it does open up that conversation again of just, you know, is simplicity the right answer here, or is there an opportunity for us to potentially bring in some sort of different levels of offering that could drive revenue for those customers who really want to use a substantial amount of bandwidth. So it'll be, I think we're continuing to do day by day like everyone else in this space, but I think those kind of are the immediate ones that come to mind.
Okay, Derrick, thank you, Tara. Derrick, do you have any ideas about what's the low-hanging fruit right now, given the environment that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think also looking at partnerships is something that we're doing. I think it's a space, unlike Southwest, that we've kind of underinvested in. It's something that we've been going all in on the in-flight entertainment front, but there are a lot of, if you think about just like a little bit out of industry, for example, of like the apps that you might be using day to day, or I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to kind of partner more on an app-based level. So we have a free messaging pass, but we don't necessarily, we've never like really expanded beyond that. So I think I think there is a way for us to kind of look at like, are there key strategic partners that we take on? I think it also kind of goes into like the conversation of the move toward a more complementary Wi-Fi offering. Is this kind of like an in-between ground that we can look at? And so I think, and I think the whole point of that would also be to offset costs through those partnerships. I think the kind of tiered Wi-Fi offering is also something that we're thinking about. I think there's so many different use cases. There's someone who, I think we check the box really well on like someone who just wants to message and make sure that their cab is picking them up. But we haven't really thought through like all of the different customer profiles and trying to find products that fit with them. And so I think as we think about like right now it's like you have free messaging or you're paying X dollars for a Wi-Fi pass. There's no in between. And I think we need to find that in between.
All right, excellent. Well, I hope you do soon. I don't know if anyone else heard that. I'm just wondering if any of you guys have any sort of grand designs. We've seen a lot in the last little while that airlines are sort of bringing together their commercial operations together with the IFE teams and to sort of cook things up there. And then we've seen a lot of airlines that are just branching out of aviation stuff entirely. AirAsia comes to mind. I think Singapore Airlines has been getting into that. We see Virgin, you know, with the loyalty, mixing with the loyalty and the credit card groups and things like that. So is that something that either of your operations are looking at? And then maybe Frederik could add some thoughts on what a really well-connected fleet could mean for some grander ambitions or of an airline that wants to diversify beyond, you know, the day of journey.
I think from a Southwest perspective, we've really focused on expanding the network more so than anything. I mean, we've added 10 new airports, so not necessarily new cities, but airports during this time, which is pretty unheard of, and especially from a Southwest perspective, we don't take going into new markets lightly. And so I think we've really focused in on how do we, our leadership as a company has really dove into how can we expand for the future, and really looking at it more, you know, we do operations really well. And so continuing to take those learnings and adding new, you know, dots on the map is a great way to take advantage of that. Our loyalty partnerships are strong as well. If we mentioned the Chase one, continuing to drive the usage from a card perspective and offering really great values. We currently are running an 80,000 point offer, which for Southwest credit cards is, I'm pretty confident we've never had an offer that high. And so that's multiple, you know, round trip flights, asterisk obviously of what flights those could look like, but it's a huge opportunity for us to get those credit card members on board with the card itself, because even if they're taking that one trip that they just had to kind of get away, rather than just focusing on selling them their next trip with us, knowing it's hard to travel during this time, but getting that card in their wallet and having it top of wallet is super important. So I think that's where we've started to, I think going though back to the new destinations is where we've really started to diversify as an airline during this time of diving resources into improving that footprint and connecting folks to places where they potentially want to go that are outdoor destinations and travel to during this time, which I think is really setting us apart in that regard.
Okay, so keeping it focused on the airline operations and being a big, strong, good airline.
Yeah, I mean, might as well we do it well. Let's just keep doing it and, you know, dive in deep.
All right, Derrick, same question, really. You know, does, I guess, Alaska have any ambitions to diversify from an e-commerce.com sort of eBay-like perspective? And, you know, how can a connected fleet maybe support those ambitions if you do have them?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're necessarily kind of going to diversify from kind of like what we do best, which is, you know, flying people to the places that they love. You know, I think we've also kind of taken a little bit bolder of a stance in diversifying the destinations that we fly to. We've added a few new markets. We've connected dots that were already on our map, but not through a nonstop. And so I think it's, you know, if you're focusing just on kind of a network standpoint, I think it's allowed us to make optimizations there, but I'm not sure. That's probably the biggest bet that we've made over the pandemic.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Derrick. Frederik, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Well, it brought back to mind a statement I saw from JetBlue's CEO, Robin Hayes, earlier this week, who said what I'm currently observing in the industry is like watching kids at a soccer game with everybody chasing down the ball and nobody playing their position. You can read that both ways. You can read it as a negative, but it's also a positive where people are clearly experimenting, being unhappy with their current position and trying something new, something else. And I think that's, yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict, but that's what you see going on in the industry. So some will be really comfortable with doing what they've always done, and they're doing it well, and they're trying to build upon that and just growing that. There are others that have realized through the crisis that the way they were doing things wasn't that optimal, and it has landed them into trouble. And if they have the means to get out of that hole and do something different, they will probably try that. And I think it's fascinating to see that. It's very hard to predict what will be successful, but clearly all these innovations and attempts are good for the industry, and will ultimately change things. And I think that's where yeah, technology can help, but let's be clear, it's not like IFC is going to drive that. I mean, this is much more fundamental.
Okay, great. Thank you, Frederik. We've got a question from Rick, who's watching. He says he asks, to streamline Wi-Fi purchasing process, do either of the airline representatives see the possibility in the future of selling Wi-Fi access at the point of ticket purchase?
I think from a Southwest perspective, that's something that's been on a roadmap for a long time. Obviously, when you start integrating with internal tech resources, it kind of goes back to the earlier comment about the return on investment, because there's so many needs there. But I think when you really start to look at the traditional business traveler, for example, when they're booking their ticket or their travel manager is booking their ticket for them, by going ahead and being able to add that purchase on, eliminates that second purchase later on. Especially for us from a portal perspective, we don't have Rapid Rewards account integration in the portal. So the customer has to pull out their credit card, has to on their, maybe their new iPad or their iPhone 12 mini, the little tiny screen, has to type in those 16 characters. So it can be easy to fat finger a number along the way. We do have other payment options as well, like PayPal and Apple Pay, but the credit card itself, it's there's a lot of opportunity to streamline that experience earlier in the purchase process when they're buying their ticket. So then it's one less step for the customer to have to take when they're on board. I think it's just a manner of when that gets prioritized internally with all the other needs of our technology resources.
Okay, Derrick, any thoughts on selling it at the ticket purchase moment?
Yeah, I think that's something that has also kind of been on a backlog for us. But I think it's really also kind of I think the broader conversation that we're having internally is like, how do you make the booking experience really great for our guests? So we don't necessarily want to start cluttering that up with upsell after upsell. We want to make sure that that feels like a very native and seamless experience. And so, you know, as we start to think about the fact that we have mixed technology type, dynamic pricing, we don't have the flat $8 pricing necessarily, it starts to get very complicated very quickly. And so it's really striking that balance of like, how do we just make sure that booking a ticket remains simple?
Okay, and then Frederik, I'd be curious to hear from your perspective, because with GoGo, it was you would buy your airtime from GoGo. How is it going to be for your existing customers? Are you working with each individual airline, or do you have a certain way that you would like to carry on with these transactions for new customers? How would you prefer to set it up?
Well, clearly, we're supporting every airline that we have today and the ones going in the future with every way they want to set it up. But it's clear that, and you hear it from the survey, you hear it from the people here on the panel, the hassle that people have to deal with causes friction, and taking away friction. And I'm a bit passionate about this subject. I think it should be a major driver, and it doesn't have to be a process with so much friction. So I think what will be enabling is technologies to take that away. Those technologies are here today, by the way. I mean, it's not something that you need to wait for. If you want to implement it, you can simplify things. And yeah, ultimately, the most ideal situation from a passenger perspective, if it's offered as part of your experience. So if it's free or somehow included in things where you can just get on and use it. And taking a parallel with the hotel industry many years ago, we all remember you got to a room and there was a little card and you had to punch in all kinds of things to try and get online and pay for things. That evolved into where it's now just standard and it's often quite hassle-free. You just connect to the Wi-Fi network and you're on. I see that happening in the airline industry, and recently Airbus, I think, mentioned that they completely expect that from like 2030 onwards, every aircraft rolling off the production line will have IFC standard on the aircraft. So it's becoming this standard feature. But yeah, there is probably a transitionary period, and each and every airline will make their own trade-offs there and how they want to implement. And yeah, as a supplier, of course, we're just there to support them in the way they want to do it.
Okay, thank you. We've got 4 minutes left, so I'm going to ask one final question about IoT. Internet of Things, if we look at in the cabin in particular, this is something that connectivity can enable. It was a really hot topic a little while ago, and it seems to have been put aside like so many other things as we focus on getting through the pandemic. Does anybody have any thoughts on how IoT can help in the current crisis, in the current situation, or is this something that we need to come back to once things become more normal?
I mean, I think that there's a never-ending list of opportunities, that's for sure. I think it goes for us though back to how can we eliminate a lot of that communication that exists, so that when I think of our ground crews and our flight attendants, and we have the opportunity of, do we ever get to a point to where we truly have a smart galley where it's being real-time updated of, from a weight perspective of if they know that, the weight equates to X number of drinks in this part of the galley, that's constantly being sent down to the provisioning station where that aircraft is flying to. So there's no dependency on someone to count to see what's going on. And just having those efficient opportunities to really drive some of the manual aspects that aren't adding value to really bring in a whole nother level. So I that's kind of that pie in the sky of how would we use it in the future. I think from a current perspective, it goes back to where are those things where we can find opportunities to self-service for customers to eliminate the need for them to have to depend on somebody to when things don't go the way that they're supposed to. So trying to find ways to communicate when communication is hard. So.
Okay. In 1 minute, does anybody else want to add something to that question?
Well, Marianne, just to build upon that point, I think IoT certainly isn't dead. You're hearing maybe less about it, but that tends to be the case with hype cycles. You move on, the hype sort of goes away in the media, but in the back, the people that need to implement this kind of stuff still put in the blood, sweat, and tears to make it happen. And I think that move towards smart equipment on board the aircraft and things being reported directly is still very much in play, and it's happening.
Good. Well, I'm sure that will also help us with our business case discussions. I would like to thank all the panelists so much for joining us today, and I hope that the audience enjoyed the session as well. Thank you guys for being here, and I will now turn it back over to Ryan at FTE, who's going to share some more information with everyone.
Thank you very much, Marianne, and thank you to all of you for taking part in that really insightful session. And thanks to those of you watching as well who submitted a question and got involved in the discussion. So a quick reminder to all of our attendees that the exhibition hall is open throughout today and tomorrow. So please make sure you don't miss the opportunity to visit all of the exhibitors' booths. And a reminder also that in about 30 minutes time, our next virtual networking session will be getting underway. So I encourage you to get involved in that too. So thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.